The message just said, "You missed me tonight." He had never given anyone from the gym his number. He was still staring at the screen when he heard something outside his bedroom window. A slow knock. Then another. "Welcome to Luno Vault. Tonight, I have 3 true creepy gym horror stories for you." The first story happened to me about 2 summers ago, back when I was going to a 24-hour gym near my apartment almost every night after work. For the sake of the story, just call me Evan. At that point in my life, the gym was the most stable part of my routine. Work was messy, my sleep schedule was a disaster, and I was not really doing much outside of going home, eating something, and lifting. So I ended up at the same gym almost every evening around the same time. Same front desk people, same music, same regulars. After enough weeks of that, you start recognizing everybody, even if you never technically meet them. One of the regulars was this guy named Ryan. At first, he seemed normal enough. He was there all the time, usually in fitted shirts, always carrying the same big black duffel bag, always walking around like he had somewhere important to be, even when he clearly didn't. We started with the usual gym acknowledgement, just a nod. Then what's up? Then one day, he asked me for a spot on the inclined bench, and that kind of broke the seal. After that, he acted like we were friends. Not close friends, just gym friends. The kind where you talk about workouts, supplements, maybe laugh about somebody curling in the squat rack. He was energetic, maybe a little too energetic, but I didn't think much of it. He asked what split I was running, asked if I lived nearby, asked where I worked. I kept everything broad and vague. Nothing specific, just general enough to be polite. Then he asked for my social media. That felt normal too, honestly. That's just how people do it now. So I gave it to him. At first, his messages were harmless. Gym memes, random clips of bodybuilders, questions about whether I was training chest or back that day. I kept my replies short, mostly because I am just not a big texter. But he didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he noticed and just didn't care. A week or 2 later, he asked if I wanted to grab food after lifting. I said sure. That was probably mistake number 1. We went to one of those places near the gym that stays open late and serves protein bowls and overpriced smoothies. And that was when I realized he was a very different person outside the gym. Inside the gym, he had this controlled, almost rehearsed energy. Outside it, he was weirdly intense. He talked fast, interrupted constantly, kept leaning in too close. And the biggest thing, the thing that put me off almost immediately, was how often he said my name. Not casually, constantly. Every sentence was, "Evan, listen," or "Evan, you know what I mean?" or "Evan, that's exactly what I'm saying." It sounds small, but when somebody repeats your name that much, especially when you barely know them, it starts to feel strange, like they're trying to force closeness where there isn't any. Still, I finished the meal, kept it polite, and told myself he was just socially awkward. After that, the messages got more frequent. If I didn't reply for an hour, he would send another one. If I left him on scene, he would send a question mark. If I didn't go to the gym one night, he would ask where I was. At one point he sent, "I didn't see you. Everything okay?" That was the first message that really bothered me. Not because it was threatening, but because it meant he was actively tracking when I was there and when I wasn't. And suddenly, all the harmless little interactions we'd had started feeling different. I slowed down my replies even more. Then one Friday, I skipped the gym and went out with 2 friends instead. Around midnight, I checked my phone and saw a message from Ryan. "You look different out of gym clothes." That was the entire message. I stared at it for a second before I understood what it meant. He had seen me. Somewhere. The problem was I hadn't posted anything. No pictures. No story. Nothing that would show where I was or what I was doing. I looked up and started scanning the bar, but it was packed and loud. and dim, and I didn't see him. I left not long after that. The next day, I didn't answer his message. He sent another one late that night. You should have said hi. At that point, my stomach dropped, because now I knew for sure it wasn't a coincidence. He had been there long enough to see me, recognize me, and watch me without making himself known. And instead of approaching me like a normal person, he waited until later and messaged me about it. I stopped answering completely after that. At the gym, I started changing my times. Sometimes I'd go earlier, sometimes later, sometimes not at all. But no matter what I did, he kept turning up. Not always right next to me. Sometimes just somewhere in the room, sitting longer than he needed to, pretending to adjust a machine, standing by the mirrors with that bag at his feet. And every time I looked over, he would already be looking at me. One night I got home, took a shower, and was just getting into bed when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message said, "You missed me tonight." I actually thought it was a joke at first. Then another message came in. I waited by the dumbbells for 20 minutes. My whole body went cold. He had my number. I had never given him my number. I got up, locked the bedroom door, and immediately started thinking through all the stupid ways he could have gotten it. Maybe from a sign-in sheet, maybe from somebody at the gym, maybe from social media somehow. I don't know. Then I heard the knock, very light. Outside my bedroom window. My room was on the first floor facing the side yard, and the blinds were already shut, so I couldn't see anything. I just stood there frozen with my phone in my hand while the knock came again. Not loud, not frantic, just enough to let me know somebody was there. I texted back and said if he was outside my house, I was calling the police. No answer. I moved the blinds just enough to look out, and I couldn't see a face, but I did see a figure stepping away from the window into the dark. I called 911 immediately. By the time officers arrived, no one was there. Nothing happened after that night, at least not physically. But I changed gyms, locked down all my accounts, and never responded to anything again. A few weeks later, the messages stopped. I still do not know how he got my number. And I still hate the feeling of somebody from a place as normal as a gym deciding that just because you said yes to one meal, they now belong in your life. The second story happened to a woman I used to work with named Claire. She was in her mid-20s, lived alone, and went to a chain gym in the mornings before work. She told me this story one night after we were talking about how weird gym regulars can be, and by the time she finished it, both of us were sitting there with our food untouched. Claire had been going to the same gym for over a year. She kept to herself, wore headphones, never stayed long, and did the exact same routine almost every day. Cardio first, then upper body or legs depending on the day, then out. There was a guy there she noticed because he was impossible not to notice. He never really worked out. He just sort of hovered. Sometimes he sat on a machine without moving the weights. Sometimes he walked slow laps around the free weight area. Sometimes he stood by the stretching mats pretending to look at his phone while clearly watching people. At first, Claire only noticed him in the general sense, like, oh, that same weird guy is here again. Then she realized he was always somewhere with a clear view of her. If she moved to another section, a little while later he would be there too. If she went upstairs to the cardio area, he'd show up leaning against the railing. If she finished and headed to the locker room, she would pass him in the hall like he had just happened to be wandering that direction too. The first time it really scared her was when she was doing squats facing the mirror and saw him behind her, holding his phone chest high. It was angled in her direction, and the second she stopped and looked at him directly, he lowered it. She wasn't sure if he had been recording or taking pictures, but the possibility was enough. After that, she started watching him more carefully, and once she did, the pattern became impossible to ignore. He never talked to anyone, never laughed with anybody, never seemed to meet friends there, just watched. Claire reported him once to the front desk, but because she had no proof, they gave her the usual answer. They said they'd keep an eye on it. Nothing changed, so she changed her schedule. Instead of going in the morning before work, she started going much later at night, figuring that if he was some kind of creature of habit, he probably wouldn't be there. For a little while, that seemed to work. Then one weekend, she went downtown with friends. They were at a crowded bar, and at some point she turned toward the back wall and saw him sitting alone at a tiny table near the exit. Not drinking, not talking, just watching her. She said the second their eyes met, it felt like every sound in the room dropped away. Not because anything dramatic happened. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't come over. He just looked down. Like getting caught didn't matter. She left that bar within 10 minutes. After that, the gym stopped feeling like the main problem, because now it was clear he was not just someone who happened to be in the same place as her a lot. He was following her. She stopped going to that gym for a few weeks entirely. Then one afternoon, thinking enough time had passed, she went running at a nature trail near her neighborhood instead. Middle of the day, good weather, plenty of people around at the entrance. She started her run, and about 10 minutes in, she heard footsteps behind her. At first, she ignored it. Then she sped up a little. The footsteps sped up too. She slowed down. They slowed down. She glanced back and saw a man in a baseball cap jogging the same distance behind her the entire time. She couldn't see his face clearly, but the build, the posture, the way he held his shoulders, all of it felt horribly familiar. She knew there was a smaller side path up ahead that led out to a residential street. The moment she turned onto it, the footsteps behind her changed. They got faster. Not jogging now, sprinting. She broke into a full run and didn't even look back again until she hit the street and started yelling for help. A man working in his driveway looked up right away, and the second there was another person in view, the guy behind her stopped at the edge of the trail and turned around. By the time anyone could go after him, he was gone. Claire never saw him at the gym again after that, but she also never went back. She joined a different gym across town, changed her route to work for a while, and got very used to checking every reflection around her in public. The part that stayed with her most was how patient he had been. He never rushed it. He let it build slowly, from glances to proximity to showing up in places he had no reason to be. And honestly, that kind of patience is what makes people like that frightening. The third story happened to a guy named Marcus, and this one is probably the most unsettling to me, because if what he thinks is true, then the whole thing started with something as simple as spotting somebody on bench press. Marcus used to work evenings, so he always hit the gym late, like close to closing late. That meant he saw the same tiny group of night regulars over and over. People who lifted quietly, wiped down their benches, and minded their own business. One of the regulars was this guy everybody knew by face but not by name. Huge duffel bag, tank tops, always seemed to be there longer than anyone else. If Marcus had to describe him now, he says the guy gave off the vibe of somebody trying very hard to look casual. One night the guy asked Marcus for a spot. Nothing weird about that. Marcus spotted him, re-racked the bar, and the guy thanked him. That should have been the end of it. Instead, the guy started talking, asked what Marcus trained that day, asked what car he drove, asked if he lived far, asked if he usually came that late. Marcus answered vaguely, but not rudely. That was his mistake, he said later. Being polite when your gut is telling you to shut something down immediately. For the next few weeks, the guy kept attaching himself to Marcus's workouts. He'd appear beside whatever station Marcus was using and start talking. He'd offer unsolicited advice. He'd ask if Marcus wanted to hit another set together. He'd stand there too long, even after the conversation was clearly over. It wasn't threatening, exactly, just relentless. Then one night, Marcus came out after closing and found a folded note tucked under his windshield wiper. No name, just, "You should train chest twice a week." That was strange enough on its own. The next note came 2 nights later. "Your left shoulder drops when you press." Then another, "You look tired tonight." And another, "Why'd you leave early?" That was when Marcus realized something that made his skin crawl. The notes were not random jokes. They were specific observations from somebody who had been watching him closely enough to notice details even he hadn't thought about. He started parking farther away, then in a different part of the lot, then under lights. The notes kept appearing. He never actually saw the guy place one, but deep down, he already knew who it was. One night, after finding yet another note, Marcus decided to wait inside his car instead of driving off. He parked with the lights off and sat low in the seat, watching the gym entrance in the mirror. About 10 minutes later, he saw movement. The same guy from the gym walked slowly between rows of parked cars, glancing at windshields. Not heading to his own car, looking, searching. He stopped beside Marcus's car, pulled something from his pocket, and reached for the windshield. Marcus hit the horn. The guy jumped so hard he nearly dropped whatever he was holding, then stepped back and stared at the windshield like he couldn't believe Marcus was still inside. Marcus got out and asked what he was doing. The guy just smiled. Not embarrassed, not apologetic. Just smiled and said, "I was leaving you a tip." Marcus told him to stay away from his car and stay away from him. The guy laughed and said something like, "You don't have to act like that." Marcus reported him to the front desk that same night, and apparently he had already made other people uncomfortable too, because the manager took it seriously. They reviewed what camera footage they had, and while they couldn't see everything in the lot, they had enough to revoke his membership. That should have been the end of it. But about a week later, Marcus came home from work and found a folded gym towel on the hood of his car. Not one of his. A gym towel from that exact location, with the logo stitched into the corner. Inside, it was a note. "Still training late?" He never figured out how the guy found out where he lived. He never found out if it was from following him, from checking his registration somehow, or from pure bad luck. He just knew that once it reached that point, the gym itself didn't matter anymore. Marcus filed a police report, bought cameras, and slept at his brother's place for a few days. Nothing physical ever happened. But he said that for months afterward, every time he parked anywhere, he checked the windshield before he even got out. So those were 3 creepy true gym horror stories. A regular who got far too close. A watcher who followed the routine out of the gym and into real life. And a man who turned something as ordinary as a note under a windshield into a threat. The unsettling thing about gym stories like these is how normal they look at the beginning. A spot on bench, a quick conversation, a familiar face you start seeing all the time. That is what makes the shift so hard to catch. Because by the time you realize somebody's not just being friendly, they may already know much more about you than you ever meant to share. And sometimes, the creepiest people are the ones who learn your routine first, and only then decide to make themselves part of it.